It has been 2 years since Sarah's husband died, and during all that time, the cabin they had in the mountains has remained empty and locked up. However, the day she decided to return, her skin crawled the moment she saw the garden. The favorite roses of Ethan, her husband, were lush, perfectly pruned, and had clearly just been watered. When, overcoming her fear, she checked the secret recordings from the security cameras, what she saw on the screen nearly stopped her heart. But before the story begins, I'm going to ask you for something very simple. Right now, type in the comments which city and country you're watching this video from. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so the channel can keep growing and bring you even more intense and surprising stories. The black sedan moved slowly through the fine mist that covered the mountainous area that afternoon. At the wheel, Sarah let out a long sigh. She was gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned white, trying to release the tightness constricting her chest. It had already been 2 years since the sudden death of Ethan, her husband, from a supposed massive heart attack. In all that time, Sarah hadn't been able to set foot in the mountain cabin where they had shared so many happy moments. There were too many sweet memories that now stung like open wounds. But that day, she had no choice. She had made the decision to sell the property. The cost of maintenance, combined with the pain she felt every time she thought of that place, made her believe that letting it go was the best path. Sarah turned onto a narrow stone path that led to the cabin's gate. She had mentally prepared herself to see something sad and neglected. Tall grass, peeling paint on the walls, dry leaves everywhere. The dense and gloomy atmosphere typical of an abandoned house. She had even assumed she would have to spend almost all her savings to hire a deep cleaning service before she could even post the for sale ad. However, when she spotted the wooden gate in the distance, she frowned and slowed down. She narrowed her eyes, wondering if her sight was deceiving her. What was in front of her didn't match what she expected. There were no overgrown weeds or faded paint. The wooden gate gleamed as if it had been recently varnished, well-kept, solid, too perfect for a place that had been empty for 2 years. She stopped the car in front of the gate and got out with hesitant steps. The cold mountain air whipped against her long, modest dress, making the fabric sway gently. She pulled her cardigan tighter to make sure it was still properly in place and walked towards the entrance. Her eyes widened as she saw the front garden. The roses grew lushly and were lined up with precision. They weren't just any roses, but a rare, imported variety that Ethan had been fascinated with in life. Sarah remembered how complicated they were to care for. Fertilizing them with special products, pruning them carefully, watering them on an almost ritualistic schedule. If the cabin had been uninhabited for 2 years, those plants should have been dry and dead. But the exact opposite was true. The petals were perfect, without a single burnt leaf, and the soil around them was soft and damp, a clear sign that someone had watered them that very morning or the previous evening. Sarah's heart began to pound. A flood of questions washed over her. Who was taking care of this garden? It could be Ryan, Ethan's cousin, to whom they had once left a spare key just in case. But Ryan always complained about being busy with his work out of town, and when he needed money, he didn't hesitate to call her to borrow some, claiming his business was doing poorly. It was almost impossible to imagine him investing time and money in caring for a cabin so far away just out of goodwill. Sarah rummaged through her purse until she found the key to the padlock. With a trembling hand, she inserted it into the lock. The padlock turned effortlessly, without a single trace of rust, as if it were used often. She pushed the gate open and stepped onto the property. The atmosphere felt alive. There was none of the dusty silence of an abandoned house. She walked slowly to the main door, observing every detail. The porch was immaculate. The marble floor didn't have a single layer of dust. To one side of the door, on the shoe rack, sat a pair of house slippers, carefully aligned, gleaming as if they were brand new. A shiver ran down her spine. She felt like an intruder about to enter someone else's home, despite knowing the deed was in her name and her late husband's. She pressed her ear against the solid wood door. Absolute silence. No sound of footsteps, televisions, or conversation. Holding her breath, she turned the key in the lock. The door opened without the creak of old hinges. The smell from inside hit her instantly. It wasn't the stale scent of abandonment, but a soft fragrance of lavender air freshener, the same one Ethan had loved so much. She took a step into the living room and felt her legs tremble as they sank into the plush, clean carpet. She scanned the room. Everything was in its place, like something out of a magazine. The curtains on the large windows were elegantly tied back, letting in the golden afternoon light. The leather sofa shone, spotless. The glass coffee table had no fingerprints or dust. On the dining room table, a vase displayed fresh-cut flowers. Sarah felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She couldn't attribute this to ghosts. It was the careful work of someone of flesh and blood, someone who was living there, or at least using the cabin as if it were their own. She considered the possibility of a squatter, but quickly dismissed the idea. Where would they get the money to buy expensive air fresheners, fill the fridge, and maintain such a complex garden? She headed to the kitchen with a heavy heart. There, too, everything gleamed. The appliances were plugged in and working. She dared to open the refrigerator. Her jaw dropped. It was stocked to the brim. There were fresh fruits, packaged drinks, vegetables, meat, dairy products, all with expiration dates proving they had been purchased just a few days ago. She closed the door with her hands now weak. She backed up a couple of steps, feeling fear begin to seep into her bones. She wasn't alone, and whoever was living there could return at any moment. Still, her curiosity won out. She had to know who had dared to take over the house Ethan had left for his family. Then she remembered something: Ethan's office. There was a hidden room behind a bookshelf where he kept the safe and the server for the security cameras. Ethan had been a fanatic about security. He had installed tiny cameras in corners impossible for a normal visitor to detect. Sarah prayed silently that the system was still operational. She went up the stairs cautiously to the second floor. The office door was closed, but it turned without resistance. Inside, the same neatness: an organized desk, tidy shelves, not a speck of dust. She went straight to the large bookshelf attached to the wall. She felt along the bottom edge of the third shelf, searching blindly for the small hidden wooden panel. When she pressed it, a soft click sounded, and the bookshelf slid forward a few inches. Sarah pulled it until she had enough of an opening to slip through. The air in the secret room felt a bit stuffy, but all the equipment was still there, lined up just as Ethan had left it. She sat in the small chair in front of the row of turned-off monitors and powered on the main unit. The indicator lights flickered. The internal fan whirred. Sarah held her breath as the system booted up. The security program's logo appeared on the screen, and as soon as she entered the password, their wedding date, the panel opened, showing several windows with live camera feeds. Living room, kitchen, terrace, master bedroom, all empty. At least for the moment, it seemed she was the only one in the house, but she needed answers. She moved the mouse to the recordings menu and opened the files from the previous night. At first, she only saw empty rooms. She sped up the playback. Suddenly, the front door opened on the screen, and the living room light turned on. Sarah leaned closer to the screen, squinting. A man walked in with complete naturalness, with the ease of an owner. He was wearing a loose white shirt and comfortable cotton pants for being at home. Sarah covered her mouth to stifle a scream. Those clothes belonged to Ethan. She recognized them instantly. When the man turned towards the camera hidden behind the wall clock, his face was perfectly illuminated. It was Ryan, Ethan's cousin. Sarah felt her blood boil. So he had been enjoying the cabin all this time while crying poverty and asking her for money. Rage began to burn in her chest, but the shock wasn't over. In the recording, Ryan plopped down on the sofa, turned on the television, and called out to someone. From the staircase, a woman in a silk nightgown descended. Her long hair was down, and she walked with the confidence of someone in her own home. When the woman passed under the crystal chandelier in the living room, Sarah felt her world crumble. She knew that face, that smile, all too well. She saw it almost every week at gatherings, lunches, and when she hugged her to console her over Ethan's death. It was Chloe, her best friend. Sarah froze. Chloe, the one who held her when she broke down crying, the one who told her to be strong, the one who claimed to be incredibly busy running her boutique, was here in Sarah's cabin with Ethan's cousin. On the screen, Chloe approached Ryan with a tray of cut fruit and 2 glasses. She sat next to him, too close to be just a friend. Ryan put his arm around her shoulders with familiarity, and she rested her head on his chest. They laughed, chatted calmly, enjoying the house that for Sarah was a sanctuary of memories. Tears began to slip down Sarah's cheeks without her noticing. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a fury so intense it burned inside her. This betrayal was too brutal. 2 of the people she trusted most had stabbed her in the back in the most vile way. She turned up the volume on the recording. The audio was a bit noisy but understandable. She heard Ryan's voice, hoarse and satisfied. "It's so nice here, isn't it, Chloe? Taking care of this place wasn't for nothing," he said as he picked up a slice of apple. Chloe smiled and fed him another piece. "Of course. Better we enjoy it than sell it cheap to that foolish widow. Besides, she'll never suspect. Sarah is too naive. She thinks you're the devoted cousin, and I'm the faithful friend." Sarah's fist clenched so tightly her nails dug into her palm. She repeated in a low voice, trembling with rage, "Foolish widow." She kept watching the screen, memorizing every gesture, every word. But what came next was even more chilling. Ryan got up from the sofa, pacing with a serious expression. "How much longer are we going to keep hiding like this?" he growled. "When can we put this house in our names? I'm sick of pretending I'm some poor schmuck in front of Sarah." Chloe let out a cold laugh. "Calm down, everything takes time. We already managed to get Ethan out of the picture 2 years ago without a trace. How can you not handle a couple of papers?" The air left Sarah's lungs. Get Ethan out of the picture without a trace. What was she hearing? She replayed that fragment, rewound a few seconds, and put on headphones to hear more clearly. Chloe's phrase echoed in her head. "We already managed to get Ethan out of the picture 2 years ago without a trace." Sarah's body began to tremble uncontrollably. She hugged herself, trying to contain the shivers. Until that moment, the entire family had assumed Ethan had died of a natural heart attack. The doctor said it was logical given his history of high cholesterol and long work hours. No one suspected anything. No one requested an autopsy. They buried him in peace, and Sarah accepted the tragedy with resignation. Now that peace was shattering into 1,000 pieces, she rewound again and kept listening. "Don't talk about that out loud," Ryan warned in the recording, visibly nervous, even though they were alone. "If someone hears you, we're finished." "Who's going to hear us?" Chloe scoffed as she poured herself some water. "The cabin is isolated. Sarah won't come back because she's scared of the place, and the town neighbors don't care. Our plan was perfect. That herbal remedy I swapped for his heart medication worked slowly, but surely. No test detected poison, just heart failure." Sarah clapped her hands over her mouth to muffle the sob that was fighting to escape. The tears streamed uncontrollably. Suddenly, so many things made sense. A month before he died, Ethan had mentioned that his medication tasted different, more bitter. That time, Chloe had offered to go to the pharmacy because Sarah was sick with a bad infection. When she returned, Chloe assured her they had switched to an equivalent generic. Sarah hadn't doubted for a second, and now she saw that it was the first piece of a carefully planned murder. Her best friend had slowly poisoned the man she claimed to be helping her mourn. Sarah's stomach churned. She felt nauseous, wanted to scream, but suddenly a colder part of her mind ignited. The survival instinct. A distant engine sound snapped her out of her trance, the sound of a car approaching the cabin. Sarah tensed, took off the headphones, and strained to hear. The engine sound grew clearer, nearing the gate. She looked at the exterior camera monitor. A white SUV was stopping in front of the entrance. Ryan got out to open the gate. "They're here." Panic shot through her. Her sedan was still parked in the driveway, right in front of the porch. Ryan would see it in seconds. She cursed her carelessness for not leaving it outside. She knew she couldn't go out and confront them. He was a large, strong man, and if they discovered she knew the whole truth, they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate her just as they had Ethan. She looked around the small secret room. It was a windowless room, a simple cubicle with a computer and files. The only entrance was behind the office bookshelf. If they didn't come in here, she'd be safe. But if they checked the office, on the monitor, she saw the SUV enter the property and stop next to her car. Ryan and Chloe got out, their faces tense. "Whose car is this?" Ryan asked. The porch camera's microphone clearly picked up his voice. He circled Sarah's sedan, looking through the windows. "It's Sarah's car," Chloe moaned, pale. "What is she doing here? Didn't she say she was going to her mother's place in Richmond?" "Who cares?" Ryan spat, pulling something from his pocket. Maybe a weapon or his phone. "Find her. She has to be inside. She can't see us here." Sarah quickly turned off the monitor so the light wouldn't give away her hiding spot. Darkness enveloped her, broken only by a faint sliver of light filtering through the crack behind the bookshelf. She huddled in a corner, praying silently. She heard the front door slam against the wall. Ryan's heavy footsteps, Chloe's heels echoing on the floor below. "Sarah! Sarah!" Ryan roared. "Come out of wherever you are!" They started banging on furniture, throwing open doors violently, searching the kitchen, bathroom, guest rooms. "She's not downstairs," Chloe shouted. "Go upstairs. Check Ethan's office." Sarah's heart seemed to stop. She heard their footsteps coming up the stairs, getting closer and closer. The office door burst open, hitting the wall. Sarah held her breath, pressing a hand against her chest to quiet the pounding that throbbed in her ears. "No one's in here," Ryan grunted, just on the other side of the bookshelf. "Check the balcony." Chloe moved towards the balcony door but stopped suddenly. "Wait, Ryan, look at this." Her voice was sharp, suspicious. "Yesterday I left the chair facing the window and now it's pointed at the desk." "It was probably the wind," he replied uneasily. "The windows are closed. Don't be an idiot. Someone sat here and look at these finger marks in the dust." Sarah squeezed her eyes shut. She had forgotten to put the chair back exactly as it was. Chloe's meticulousness was terrifyingly dangerous. "What if there's a secret room?" she blurted out suddenly. Sarah's blood ran cold. If Chloe was right, she was lost. "What room?" "Ethan never told me about anything," Ryan answered, bewildered. "Ethan was a man full of secrets. Come on, help me move this bookshelf. I have a bad feeling." Ryan grunted and started pushing. In the hidden room, the inner door vibrated. Sarah knew they were trying to open it from the outside. Luckily, the door had an automatic lock from the inside and was reinforced with steel under the wood. It wouldn't be easy to break down. "It's stuck like it's built into the wall," Ryan cursed. "Get the crowbar and hammer from the storage closet. Hurry!" Chloe ordered, almost hysterical. Ryan ran downstairs. Chloe was left alone in front of the bookshelf, breathing heavily. Sarah realized this was her only chance. She looked up at the small ventilation grate in the ceiling. She climbed onto the desk as best she could, removed the grate cover, and, gathering her strength, pulled herself into the narrow duct. It was dark, dusty, with nails that snagged and tore the fabric of her dress, but she didn't stop. She crawled as fast as she could. Below, she could hear Ryan returning, panting. "Move aside!" he bellowed. The crash of the crowbar hitting the hidden door echoed in the room she had just abandoned. Sarah kept crawling, her face drenched in sweat and tears. She reached the exit that led to the roof of the laundry area at the back. With a kick, she knocked down the outer grate and jumped to the concrete floor. The impact tore a cry of pain from her legs, but she got up immediately. Just then, a light rain began to fall, perfect for masking the sound of her footsteps. She knew she couldn't get her car. The keys were in her purse, and her purse was still inside the vehicle. All she could do was run. She went down the metal stairs to the side garden. Hiding among the soaked rose bushes, she reached the part of the wall where the fence was lower. She climbed with effort, ignoring the thorns that dug into her hands until they bled. When she finally fell to the other side, she started running without looking back, disappearing into the darkness of the rural road. She ran until her lungs burned, looking for the main road to find help or a ride. Under the increasingly heavy rain, the fear that drove her began to transform into something colder. The anguish hardened, turned to stone, became hatred. They would think she had fled in terror, that she would continue to be the weak, easily deceived widow. They would believe they had won, but they were wrong. Sarah might have lost the physical evidence. She hadn't downloaded the videos, but she carried something even more dangerous, the exact memory of every word they had spoken. As she wiped away tears mixed with rain, she made a silent vow to Ethan's memory. She wouldn't go straight to the police. That would be too easy for them. Prison could be a comfortable punishment compared to what they deserved, right? She would destroy them slowly, plunge them into the same fear and pain they had caused her, until they begged for a death that wouldn't come so quickly. The game had just begun. Later, when she finally found a small diner open on the main highway, she entered, soaked and shivering. She asked the owner for help to call a local cab. She didn't want to use any ride-sharing apps. She was afraid Ryan could track her phone. She asked to be taken to a discreet motel hidden away from the main road, a place where people of Ryan and Chloe's social class would never mix. Once in the narrow, musty-smelling room, Sarah collapsed onto the floor in front of the mirrored wardrobe. Her reflection showed the image of a woman disfigured by exhaustion, her dress covered in mud, her face pale, but in her swollen eyes shone a new flame, hard, unquenchable. She would no longer be the silent victim. That night, she didn't sleep a wink. Her mind replayed every detail of the days leading up to Ethan's death. She remembered his complaints of palpitations, the cold sweat that soaked his forehead after taking the medicine Chloe had brought him. She remembered how she had wanted to take him to the doctor, and how Chloe reassured her, saying the expensive herbs she brought were much better than his usual pills. At dawn, Sarah set her plan in motion. She didn't return to Chicago yet. First, she went to a local market, bought simple, cheap clothes to blend in, and purchased a second-hand phone with a new SIM card. She turned off her regular phone and tucked it into the bottom of her purse. She had to become invisible to them. Then she rented a modest car from a town local and drove towards the city where Ethan's trusted pharmacy was located. She remembered Chloe's phrase on the recording clearly. "I swapped his heart medication for that herbal remedy." If that was true, there must be a trail at the pharmacy, purchase records, notes, something. The shop was still the same as it was 2 years ago, a small business in an old building on a somewhat neglected avenue. Sarah entered with her heart in her throat. The sharp smell of medicine and alcohol hit her with painful memories. Behind the counter was a young man with glasses, arranging bottles of vitamins. She recognized him instantly, Thomas, the pharmacy tech who always helped Ethan, partly because he used to leave him good tips. Sarah approached with an almost mechanical politeness. Thomas was surprised but recognized her. His face showed a mix of pity and cordiality. She responded with brief sentences and slowly steered the conversation to what interested her. She told him she was organizing Ethan's medical files for an insurance matter, but had found gaps in his prescription records. She asked him, almost begging, to check the system for his medication history from the last month before he died. Thomas hesitated. He knew it was sensitive information, but seeing Sarah's pleading face and remembering Ethan's generosity, he eventually gave in. He sat in front of the computer and started searching the files from 2 years ago. The silence became heavy as he reviewed the data. Sarah twisted the hem of her sleeve between her fingers, holding her breath. Finally, Thomas frowned. He mumbled that something was strange. Sarah pressed him. Thomas turned the screen so she could see. He explained that during the last month, the prescriptions for Ethan's usual heart medication had been entered into the system but were listed as not picked up. The sale had been canceled. In its place was the purchase of a costly imported herbal preparation and several high-dose energy supplements. Sarah froze. She asked who had made that purchase. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, trying to remember. He said it hadn't been Ethan, but a woman who introduced herself as a family member. According to her, Ethan wanted to try an alternative treatment and the doctor already knew. Thomas added that the herbal preparation had dangerous side effects, especially for patients with heart conditions. He had tried to warn her, but the woman insisted and even presented an authorization letter signed by Ethan's wife, that is, by Sarah. Rage rose like a fire in her throat. She had never signed such a document. She asked Thomas to find the physical file for that authorization. The young man went to the back stockroom. It took an eternity. When he finally returned, he was carrying a dusty folder. From inside, he pulled out a wrinkled sheet of paper. Sarah almost snatched it from his hands. There was her signature, full of stiff strokes, a crude imitation of her handwriting. Worst of all, the date. On that exact day, she had been admitted to the hospital with a high fever. It was impossible for her to have signed anything. She asked Thomas if he remembered what the woman looked like. He closed his eyes again. "She was a very beautiful woman," he said, "with long hair. She spoke very sweetly and wore a very strong perfume. I also remember she had a gold bracelet with a C-shaped charm. She needed no more. That bracelet had been a birthday gift she herself had given Chloe 3 years ago. There was no room for doubt. Chloe had not only poisoned Sarah's heart with lies, but she had also poisoned Ethan's body, replacing the life-saving medication with a deadly trap. Sarah asked for copies of all the purchase records and a photocopy of the letter with the forged signature. Thomas gave them to her with a sad expression, feeling like an unwitting accomplice in that tragedy for not having imagined the extent of the deception. Sarah thanked Thomas, begging him to maintain absolute silence about her visit, especially if anyone asked about Ethan's medical history. Then, with all the papers tucked into a folder, she left the pharmacy. The midday sun was scorching, but she felt cold. Sitting in the car, she looked at the documents on her lap. They were her first weapon. Clear proof that Ethan's death had not been an accident, but she knew it wasn't time to go to the police yet. Ryan and Chloe had money, connections, an enormous capacity for lying. They could buy people off or destroy the evidence if she alerted them too soon. She had to break them from the inside, sow suspicion between them, push them to make mistakes until the case was impossible to cover up. When she finished planning her first steps, she turned her old phone back on. Instantly, the screen filled with notifications, dozens of missed calls and messages from Ryan and Chloe, all asking about her, feigning concern. Sarah took a deep breath, calmed the frantic beating of her heart, and dialed Chloe's number. She had to sound like they had always seen her, fragile, scared, dependent. The phone rang a couple of times before her friend answered, hysterical. Chloe didn't even give her time to say hello. She started firing questions. Where was she? Why was her car at the cabin? Why had her phone been off? The performance was impeccable, full of supposed anguish. Sarah closed her eyes, imagining Chloe's false, pained face, and began her story in a weak, almost broken voice, pretending to be sick. She told her she had arrived at the cabin the previous afternoon, but when she got out of the car and approached the door, she felt an intense dizziness and difficulty breathing. She said she saw a large black shadow on the porch shaped like Ethan, looking at her with rage. She claimed the terror was so great that she ran off, left the car where it was, and jumped onto the first vegetable truck that passed to get down to the city. From there, according to her story, she took a bus to Chicago, unable to drive back. She explained she turned off her phone because she didn't want to talk to anyone, that she was too in shock and only now felt able to tell what happened. On the other end of the line, there was a brief silence. Sarah knew Chloe was evaluating the story, but she also knew her Achilles heel. She had always considered Sarah to be superstitious, fearful, and easy to manipulate. The idea of Sarah seeing Ethan's ghost fit perfectly with that image. Besides, Chloe carried a guilt she wouldn't admit even to herself. Any supernatural mention could affect her. As Sarah had predicted, Chloe's voice softened, became sweeter and more compassionate. "Thank goodness you're okay, Sarah," she said, as if she truly meant it. "Ryan and I were just passing through the mountains for a work thing and saw your car at the cabin. That's why we went in to check." Sarah felt nauseous at the ease with which she lied. She forced herself to sound grateful, even asked for a favor. She begged Chloe and Ryan to bring her car back to the city because she was too scared to return to the cabin. Chloe happily agreed. She assured her they would take care of everything and that she would come to her house that night to keep her company. When she hung up, Sarah let the phone drop onto the seat and let out a bitter laugh. They had taken the bait. They believed the situation was under control, that the secret was still safe. That false sense of security would be their downfall. That same night, Sarah was already back in her house. She showered, changed her clothes, and tidied up the living room, setting the stage. Around 8 o'clock, Chloe and Ryan arrived with Sarah's car. They came in with faces full of theatrical concern. Ryan, who just hours before had been strutting around the cabin in Ethan's clothes, was now playing the protective cousin, scolding her for going to an isolated place alone. Chloe sat next to her, took her hand, massaged her shoulder with an affectionate gesture. The touch of her fingers burned her skin, but Sarah forced a weak smile and thanked them. While Chloe went to the kitchen to make tea, Sarah launched her first strike. She left a brown envelope on the living room table, clearly visible, right in front of where Ryan sat. The envelope was empty, but on the outside, she had written in red marker, "Witness August 12th. That date was the day Ethan died. Upon seeing the envelope, Ryan froze. His gaze flickered from the envelope to Sarah. "What's this?" he finally asked. His voice a bit rough. Sarah feigned surprise. "I don't know. It was in the mailbox this morning. I haven't opened it yet. I guess it's just junk mail or some weird notice," she replied, shrugging. "Why?" Ryan cleared his throat, trying to act casual. No reason. Just weird text," he said, trying to downplay it. When Chloe returned with the tea tray, Ryan shot her a look and pointed to the envelope. Her face instantly paled. The previously warm atmosphere turned tense, icy. Sarah savored every second of the nervousness that bloomed in their subtle gestures, in the bead of sweat that formed on Ryan's temple. She knew that as soon as they left, they wouldn't sleep a wink, and she had more prepared. That same night, using the new phone, she sent a text message to Ryan's phone. "That remedy tasted pretty bitter, didn't it? I saw you at the pharmacy that day." Immediately after, she turned off the phone and removed the battery. She imagined the scene inside the car on their way home when Ryan read that message. She imagined their distorted faces, fear crawling down their spines. And so it was. Back in the car, Ryan slammed on the brakes by the side of the road upon reading the message. He showed it to Chloe, red with rage and panic. "Who sent this? Who knows?" he bellowed. Chloe grabbed the phone with trembling hands. "It's impossible for anyone to know details about the pharmacy," she said, biting her lip. "I already gave Thomas money to keep his mouth shut. It can't be him. And Sarah, you saw her today. She seemed like an idiot scared of a ghost." "You're not so sure, are you?" Ryan accused her. "This could be someone trying to blackmail us." Their voices rose. They blamed each other. He accused her of being careless when buying the poison. She pointed him out as the paranoid one who had now caused chaos. The alliance they shared began to crack. Fear was her best weapon to break that complicity. That night, Sarah sat in Ethan's office under their wedding photo. She caressed the glass of the frame as if caressing her husband's cheek. "It's all right, my love," she whispered. "They've only had the appetizer. The main course is coming next." She began to plot her next move. She would make Ryan and Chloe's own panic drive them back to the cabin, to the trap already set for them. Fear would make them need money fast, and she knew where they would look for the gold Ethan had once mentioned hiding in the house. Since the anonymous message, Ryan and Chloe's life had become a living hell. They no longer slept well. Any unknown call made them jump. Ryan would spend hours looking out the window, convinced someone was watching them. Chloe, behind her calm facade, schemed 1,000 plans to save herself. Both were plagued by the same obsession. They needed a large amount of cash, either to bribe a potential blackmailer or to flee the country if the situation became unbearable. The only treasure they hadn't gotten their hands on yet were the gold bars that, according to Ethan's confidences, were hidden behind a wall in the mountain cabin. That very night, they decided to go back there. Ryan drove down the highway at full speed, his jaw clenched. Chloe sat beside him, twisting the hem of her silk blouse, without her usual glamour or smug smile. They barely spoke during the trip. The air in the car was as thick as the fog that awaited them up ahead. When they arrived, the cabin looked even more unsettling than before. A dense layer of fog covered the garden. The roses looked like hands reaching up from the earth, trying to hold them back. Ryan violently opened the front door and turned on every light he could find. He wanted no shadows. What he didn't know was that Sarah was already waiting for them there. She knew their greed and their fear, and she knew the gold would drag them back. She had left her rental car hidden among the trees in a nearby pine forest and had entered through a secondary door that only Ethan and she knew about. Now she was in the same secret control room behind the bookshelf, in front of the monitors and the home automation panel that Ethan had installed a few months before he died. The smart home system that Ryan and Chloe never learned how to operate. In the living room, Ryan and Chloe began to dismantle the place. Ryan grabbed a sledgehammer and started hitting the walls near the fireplace, looking for the hollow sound that would betray a hidden compartment. The blows echoed like thunder inside the house. Chloe shone her phone's flashlight, her face pale. As soon as Sarah saw they were focused on that wall, she pressed a button on the panel. Suddenly, all the lights in the living room went out at the same time. The darkness was total. Chloe let out a muffled scream. Ryan cursed and fumbled to turn on his phone's flashlight. "It's just a blackout. Don't be so dramatic," he growled, though his own voice trembled. "Start the generator, please. I don't like the dark," she sobbed. Before he could move, soft music started playing upstairs, a piece of classical music that Ethan adored and used to play at sunset when he sat down to read. The sound floated in the air of the silent house like an echo from another time. Ryan and Chloe looked at each other, horrified. "Who turned that on?" she whispered, clinging to his arm. "It must be an electrical fault that activated the sound system," Ryan tried to justify, but his steps became heavy as he went up the stairs. As they neared the master bedroom, a familiar scent began to fill the hallway, a mix of sandalwood and mint, Ethan's cologne. The aroma was so intense it seemed as if he had just passed by seconds before. Chloe covered her nose, her eyes glassy. "Ryan, this smell." "It's Ethan's," she murmured, on the verge of tears. "Shut up. It's just some old air freshener," he retorted, sweating cold. They reached the master bedroom. Ryan kicked the door open. The room was empty. Just then, the music cut off abruptly. Silence fell like a ton of bricks. Their gazes were drawn to an object in the middle of the room, Ethan's old rocking chair facing the window. The chair was moving slowly, creaking rhythmically, as if someone invisible were sitting in it, watching the night. Chloe screamed at the top of her lungs and ran downstairs. Ryan, still trying to maintain a brave front, raised the sledgehammer towards the empty chair. "Come out, whoever you are. Stop playing games with me," he bellowed. No one answered, only the sound of the wind hitting the window panes. His courage crumbled. He went down to the living room to find Chloe. When he arrived, he found her frozen in front of the dining table. On top, on the pristine glass, a large white envelope had appeared. Just 10 minutes ago, there had been nothing there. Ryan approached, breathing heavily. He opened the envelope. Inside was a photocopy of a supposed autopsy report for Ethan, with hospital stamps. In bold letters at the end, it read, "Cause of death, herbal alkaloid poisoning, confirmed by witness." Ryan's hands trembled so much the paper fell from them. Chloe picked it up and read it at a glance. Her knees gave way, and she fell to the floor. "They know, Ryan. They know the type of poison," she sobbed. "We have to get out of here. Ethan's spirit is here. He's going to get his revenge." "It's not a spirit. It's someone of flesh and blood," he replied, grabbing her shoulders. "A ghost doesn't photocopy documents. There's someone inside this house. They're setting a trap for us." He ran to the front door to find the intruder, but the doorknob wouldn't turn. The door was locked from the outside. He tried the service door, then the windows. All now had metal shutters lowered. Ethan had installed those automated security shutters for protection. Sarah had activated them from the panel. The cabin had become a sealed box. From the sound system integrated into the ceiling, a recording of Ethan's laughter began to play, taken on a happy day with Sarah. That laugh, which would have sounded warm to anyone else, echoed in Ryan and Chloe's ears like a judge's death sentence. The night became endless. Ryan and Chloe ended up huddled in a corner of the living room, unable to sleep, startling at every noise from the storm. At dawn, the shutters automatically raised, just as Sarah had programmed. Ryan barely waited for a gap, pulled Chloe, and they fled without looking back. They no longer cared about the gold. They just wanted to escape that house, convinced it was haunted. However, the impact of that night changed something fundamental between them: trust. Back in the city, Chloe remained silent, but her mind was working non-stop. She began to convince herself that Ryan was too impulsive, too dangerous. If she stayed with him, she was sure he would drag her down to ruin. She had to think of herself. She remembered that days before, she had managed to steal the property deed for the cabin from Ryan's safe. She had made a fake copy for him while keeping the original in her purse. Her plan was simple: sell the cabin quickly to a buyer accustomed to dealing with problematic properties, get paid in cash, and flee the country alone. On her phone, Sarah, who had managed to install a tracking app some time ago, taking advantage of a moment when she had borrowed Ryan's phone because hers had run out of battery, saw everything. She read Chloe's messages to a certain Mr. Russo, a middleman of dubious reputation who agreed to buy properties with dirty papers. They had arranged to meet at an old warehouse on the outskirts to close a cash deal. Sarah smiled coldly. It was the perfect opportunity to turn the two traders against each other. From her anonymous number, she sent Ryan a brief message that pierced him like a dart. "Your partner is about to sell your house behind your back. Old warehouse at the industrial park. Exit to Richmond, number 4. 10 a.m. Don't let her get away with your money." Ryan read the message when the car stopped at a traffic light. His eyes widened. He glanced sideways at Chloe, who was pretending to sleep. He took the opportunity to feel for her purse sneakily. She woke up with a start, protesting. He found the envelope with the original property deed for the cabin. His face turned red, not with shame, but with absolute rage. "So this was your plan," he spat. "Sell the cabin and take off alone." Chloe tried to justify herself, inventing that she planned to sell it to get money to pay the supposed blackmailer. Ryan didn't believe her. He showed her the message. Without another word, he yanked the steering wheel and headed for the warehouse from the message. Chloe screamed for him to let her go, that it was a trap, but he had lost all capacity for reason. He locked the car doors and drove like a maniac. When they arrived at the semi-abandoned warehouse, they saw a black sedan parked there. It was the buyer's car. actually an actor Sarah had hired just to be present. Ryan assumed he was Chloe's accomplice. He dragged the woman out of the car by force. "Where's the guy you're giving my papers to?" he yelled, shaking her. Chloe, terrified, insisted it was an ambush, that there was no real buyer. While Ryan advanced towards the black sedan, brandishing a tire iron as if it were a weapon, Chloe took advantage of a moment of carelessness, pushed him with all her might, and ran back to Ryan's car. She slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and tried to start the engine. He reacted and smashed the window with the tire iron, shattering the glass. She screamed and floored the accelerator. The car shot forward, grazing him. Ryan ran to an old pickup truck with the keys hanging from the ignition. Sarah had prepared that too. He started it and chased after her. A dangerous race began on deserted roads. Chloe, in a panic, drove uncontrollably. She saw Ryan getting closer and closer in the rearview mirror, his face contorted. On a sharp curve, the car lost its grip, skidded, hit the guardrail, and flipped several times before crashing into a tree. The hood was smoking. Ryan stopped the pickup truck behind and approached the wrecked vehicle, the tire iron still in his hand. Chloe hadn't lost consciousness, but she was trapped between the seat and the steering wheel. Blood stained her blouse. Still, she pleaded for his help. He laughed like a madman. "Where did you think you were going?" "Chloe?" he sneered. "If I go down, you go down with me." Just then, in the distance, police sirens began to wail, getting louder and closer. Sarah had called to report a serious accident and a fight. Ryan panicked. He couldn't get caught with a weapon in his hand, a stolen property deed, and Chloe, half conscious. He threw the tire iron and, in a desperate impulse, pulled Chloe out of the car, ignoring her screams of pain. "Move!" he ordered. "We have to get out of here." He dragged her to the pickup truck and got back on the road, taking a shortcut towards the mountains. In his altered mind, only one idea remained: the cabin, his supposed fortress. There he believed he could hide, get the gold, and flee across the country. Without realizing it, he was running straight into Sarah's final trap. The pickup truck wheezed up the steepest stretch towards the cabin. The old engine sounded like it was about to explode, but Ryan pushed it harder. Chloe, beside him, clutched her ribs with an agonized expression. Her face was bruised, her eyes sunken. The elegant, haughty woman from before had vanished. Ryan gripped the steering wheel as if he could control everything with sheer force. Mumbling, he talked to himself about gold, deeds, escaping before they caught him. When they finally arrived, he parked the truck carelessly, trampling some of the roses with the tires. He dragged Chloe to the front door, opened it with his copy of the key, and bolted it shut, piling furniture behind it as a barricade. The sky outside was black with clouds. The storm was coming. Inside, the cabin seemed to hold its breath. Ryan left Chloe on the sofa without a second glance and ran to the kitchen for tools. He returned with a heavy hammer and a crowbar and stood before the wall next to the fireplace. He vaguely remembered a drunken comment from Ethan about a safety net hidden there. For Ryan, that wall was now the border between him and his salvation. Without another thought, he began to strike. Each impact thundered through the house. Plaster flew in pieces. The wallpaper tore. Chloe coughed from the dust, begging him to stop, certain that something inhuman inhabited the cabin. He didn't listen, only stopping when the hammer hit something metallic. A different clang sounded. He focused on that area and finished breaking the plaster until the embedded door of a steel safe was exposed. Ryan laughed like a madman, kneeling before the metal. He thought he had his ticket to freedom. He felt the front panel, but his laughter died. It wasn't a mechanical dial system, but a digital keypad that required a 6-digit code. He tried Ethan's date of birth. The red light blinked, followed by a long beep. Error. He tried the date of his death. Another rejection. Sweat began to run down his forehead. He turned to Chloe, grabbing her by the collar of her blouse. "Do you know the code?" he screamed. She was crying and shaking her head. Ethan never told me anything about this. Ryan accused her of lying, of hiding the code from him. In the hallway, at that very moment, the house went dark again. All the light vanished, and they were plunged into thick darkness. Chloe let out a shriek and covered her face. Lightning illuminated the fragments of the broken wall, casting distorted shadows. Ryan turned on his phone's flashlight again, pointing it everywhere, his chest heaving. Then, from the hidden speakers, heavy footsteps were heard upstairs, right above their heads. Thump, 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 as if someone were pacing back and forth on the upper floor. Ryan raised the crowbar towards the ceiling defiantly. "Come down now," he yelled. "Stop hiding." The footsteps stopped. In their place, a recorded voice began to be heard, clear, deep, and familiar. Ethan's voice. The message sounded so crisp it seemed he was right there. "Do you know why I built this cabin?" it said. "So it would be a refuge for my family, not a hiding place for traitors." Chloe threw herself to the floor, crying, begging forgiveness from a specter she saw everywhere. Ryan, in disbelief, began to doubt his own sanity. Still, he turned back to the safe. "You want the gold?" the voice continued. "The gold is there, but only someone who remembers the happiest day of my life knows the code." Ryan gritted his teeth. The happiest day. He had tried the wedding, the date Ethan and Sarah lost their baby, other important memories. Nothing worked. Then Chloe, curled in a ball on the floor, mumbled through her sobs. Sarah. Everything in Ethan's life revolved around her. The happiest day was the day he met her. He told me once. It was February 14th, in the pouring rain, at the university bus stop. Ryan hesitated, but he had no better idea. He typed 14029. He completed it with the corresponding year. There was a short silence, and then a mechanical click. The safe's light turned green. The inner door creaked open. Ryan shouted with joy. He thought he was smarter than everyone. He pulled the heavy door with force, expecting to see piles of gleaming gold bars. When he illuminated the interior with the flashlight, his smile vanished. The safe was practically empty. There were no bars, no wads of cash, no jewels. Just a single object, an electronic tablet placed in the center, turned on. On the screen was Sarah's face in a live broadcast. She was sitting in a comfortable chair, looking at the camera with a cold, firm expression. "Congratulations, Ryan. You managed to open the safe," she said in a calm voice. "Too bad the treasure you were looking for is no longer there. I moved it to a secure account 2 days after Ethan's death. You're 2 years too late." Ryan roared with rage, grabbed the tablet, and smashed it against the floor. "Come out of your hiding place, Sarah," he howled. "I know you're in this house. Show your face if you dare." He grabbed the crowbar, determined to go up and finish her. Chloe tried to grab his arm, pleading with him not to leave her alone, but he shook her off. "If I go down, you go down. But first I'm taking that viper with me," he muttered, his eyes bloodshot. He took the stairs 2 at a time. As soon as he reached the landing, a powerful spotlight turned on from above, aimed directly at his face. The light blinded him. He put a hand to his eyes, staggering. Slowly, the beam's intensity lowered, leaving a tense, dramatic gloom. Then he saw Sarah at the top of the stairs. She was not the same woman in pastel tones and hesitant steps he knew. She wore dark, practical clothes, her hair firmly tied back. Her gaze, once timid, was now as sharp as a blade. In her hand, she held a remote control for the security system. "Drop that crowbar, Ryan," she ordered in a firm voice. He laughed mockingly. He still saw her as the soft widow, and he had an iron weapon in his hand. "Who are you to order me around?" he spat. "You're alone. There are no police or guards. The biggest mistake you've made was letting me see you?" He lunged up the stairs, raising the crowbar. Sarah didn't back down. She pressed another button. Suddenly, From vents on the sides of the staircase, a thick white smoke began to pour out. The automatic fire suppression system Ethan had installed. The cloud enveloped Ryan, making him cough and lose his bearings. Sarah's voice now resonated throughout the house via the speakers. "Ethan installed this system to protect us from burglars," she explained. He never imagined the burglar would be his own cousin. Downstairs, Chloe tried to crawl towards the door, but the furniture barricade still blocked the exit. She cried, finally aware that they were trapped in the cage they helped build. The smoke slowly dissipated, thanks to the automatic extractors. Ryan was still on the stairs, his eyes red, but still on his feet. "You're very clever. Aren't you, Sarah?" he spat. "You set all this up. You forged signatures, sent messages." "I only set the bait," she replied calmly. "You two lunged at it out of pure greed. You poisoned my husband. Did you really think God would let something like that slide?" Ryan lost his temper. "To hell with God!" he roared. "Yes, I planned it all. I told Chloe to switch those damn pills. Ethan was a selfish fool. He had everything, and I had crumbs. He deserved to die. And you, if you're still here, you will too tonight." He took a few more steps, ready to reach her. Then, Sarah raised her hand and discreetly pointed towards the ceiling. Ryan looked up by instinct. Among the moldings in the corners of the ceiling, small red LEDs were glowing. They were the cameras he had always ignored. "Those cameras don't just record," she said with an icy smile. "For the last few minutes, they've been broadcasting live to the entire family group, to Ethan's lawyer's office, and to the police emergency contacts. Your confession just went on the air." Ryan was petrified. The crowbar slipped from his hands and clattered down the steps. "What? What have you done?" he stammered. "Everyone heard you confess that you murdered Ethan," Sarah continued without raising her voice. "They saw your threats, your attempts to kill me. This is more conclusive than any autopsy report." Outside, the sirens of several patrol cars began to wail, approaching on the mountain road. Blue and red lights flashed across the windows. Ryan backed away, pale. He suddenly understood that this was no longer a private fight, but a public trial. His entire castle of lies was collapsing. He turned around and started running down, stumbling on the steps. He ignored Chloe's moans, shoving her body aside as if it were an obstacle, and threw himself at the furniture blocking the door, pushing it away. He unbolted the lock and threw the door wide open. The rain lashed inside, but he couldn't take a single step out. Dozens of floodlights blinded him from the garden. Several officers with guns drawn were aimed at the entrance. "Hands up! Drop any weapons and get on the ground!" A voice boomed through a megaphone. Ryan froze in the doorway. Sarah calmly walked down the stairs. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She passed by Chloe, who was crying inconsolably, and stopped under the porch arch. The police knew she was the one who had reported it. No one pointed a weapon at her. She watched as they subdued Ryan in the garden mud. They handcuffed him and pushed him against the ground, smearing his face with the same earth that fed Ethan's roses. Minutes later, paramedics carried Chloe out on a stretcher. As she passed Sarah, Chloe reached out a hand, searching for hers, murmuring a sorry that barely escaped her lips. Sarah didn't respond to the gesture, just looked at her with infinite weariness. "Save your apologies for the court in the hereafter," she whispered. "Here, you'll have to pay in cash for every tear you made us shed." That night, the mountain cabin, once silent, was filled with police lights and television cameras. Sarah watched as the vehicles drove away, taking the two people who were once so close. She didn't feel joy. She felt relief. The weight that had crushed her chest for 2 years was finally beginning to lift. Justice hadn't come with blows, but with patience and the intelligence of a wounded woman who refused to remain a victim. The next day, the news of the spectacular arrest at the cabin spread like wildfire. Thanks to the live broadcast Sarah had activated, the moment Ryan confessed was recorded and shared on social media over and over. His and Chloe's names became a national trend, accompanied by insults and condemnations from people outraged by their cruelty towards a family member. At the police station, the commotion was no less. Journalists crowded the doors, looking for images of the mountain murderers. Inside, the atmosphere was cold, professional. Ryan sat on a metal chair, handcuffed to the table, his body still covered in dried mud. He had a vacant stare, his eyes swollen. In another room, Chloe was being interrogated by a female officer. Unlike Ryan, who tried to maintain a defiant air, she had broken down. She cried uncontrollably, complaining of pain in her ribs and fear of prison. A veteran inspector, Detective Miller, entered Ryan's room with a tablet in his hand, placed it on the table, and played the video where he yelled that he had planned the murder. Ryan looked away. Miller explained that in addition to that evidence, they had the testimony of Thomas, the pharmacy tech, and samples of the herbal remedy found in Chloe's apartment. With all that, he told them, they had enough material to charge them with premeditated murder, document forgery, and fraud, crimes that could carry very long sentences, even life in prison. At the mention of that possibility, Ryan's facade crumbled. The brave aggressor was revealed as a coward. He started talking, trying to save himself by weakening Chloe's position. He claimed the idea of killing Ethan had been hers, that she had manipulated him with her beauty and promises. He said it was Chloe who researched which poison wouldn't be detected in tests, that it was she who forged Sarah's signature and pushed to take control of the businesses. He wanted to present himself as a weak man led astray by a femme fatale. He even begged to be allowed to apologize to Sarah, hoping for a little compassion. In the other room, Chloe listened to the recording of what Ryan was saying. She exploded in rage. She felt betrayed by the man for whom she had risked everything. Between shouts, she struck back, blaming Ryan for everything, for the gambling debts, for the idea of taking over Ethan's assets, for the threats he had made if she didn't cooperate. She revealed the existence of other fraudulent documents he kept, even plans to fake Sarah's own death in some accidental incident later on. Both, in their desperation, gave the police the missing pieces of the puzzle. When Miller finished briefing Sarah and the family's lawyers, he found her in the waiting room, serene. There was no morbid satisfaction on her face, only a deep exhaustion and the feeling that the truth was finally in the hands of the law. The next day, Ryan and Chloe's faces appeared on every newscast and website. Their social standing collapsed in a matter of hours. Ryan's family, who had always defended him, rushed to distance themselves. Chloe's boutique was boycotted. Her assets were frozen. They had lost everything: freedom, money, reputation, and future. Before they were permanently transferred to the penitentiary, Sarah asked to see them one last time from the other side of a security glass. She observed Ryan huddled in a corner of the cell, defeated, unrecognizable. She remembered the arrogant glint in his eye as he laughed on Ethan's sofa. She placed her open hand on the glass, not to seek contact, but as a gesture of closure. She said goodbye not to Ryan, but to the darkest chapter of her life. Then she turned on her heel and walked out of the building. The morning sun felt warmer than it had in a long time. 6 months later, the trial concluded. In a packed courtroom, the judge banged his gavel, silencing the murmurs of those present. After a long and exhaustive process, the court found Ryan and Chloe guilty of premeditated murder, forgery, and embezzlement. The cruelty with which they planned Ethan's death, combined with the lack of sincere remorse, closed off any possibility of clemency. Ryan received a life sentence. Upon hearing the verdict, he collapsed in the dock, fainting. His life would be forever confined behind bars, growing old with no one to mourn him. Chloe was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Her beauty had withered. Fear and guilt had stolen any spark of charm. The social punishment that fell upon them was just as harsh. They would be forever remembered as an example of where greed can lead. Once her duties at the courthouse were finished, Sarah returned to the mountain cabin. It was no longer the same place. She had ordered a major renovation. She had all the furniture that had been touched by Ryan and Chloe removed, the sofa where they embraced, the mattresses, even the wall where the safe had been. She changed curtains, colors, paintings. She wanted to erase any trace of their dark energy. There was only one thing she decided to keep: the rose garden out front. The plants were still in bloom, red and white, beautiful. For Sarah, they symbolized Ethan's memory and also the victory of truth over lies. She finally decided not to sell the cabin as she had once planned. She remembered that in life, Ethan had told her he wanted that house to be used for something good if one day they weren't using it. Thus, the idea to transform it was born. She had a carved wooden sign placed at the entrance: Ethan's Hope Shelter. The cabin became a home for talented orphan children who needed a place to live and study. Soon, the hallways that once held heavy silences were filled with children's laughter, running footsteps, and voices reading aloud. The living room where Ryan had smoked with an air of ownership was now a classroom with blackboards and bookshelves. One afternoon, Sarah sat on a garden bench, watching the children play among the roses. The fresh mountain air gently moved the petals. One of the little girls approached her with a white rose in her hand. "This is for you," she said shyly. Sarah smiled, received the flower, and tenderly stroked the girl's hair. In that moment, she felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. The resentment, rage, and pain that had consumed her had transformed into gratitude for being alive and the tranquility of knowing that Ethan's memory was clean. She looked up at the orange-tinted sky. She imagined Ethan smiling from somewhere, proud to see what had become of the house he worked so hard for. They had believed the real inheritance was gold bars and properties, but Ethan had left Sarah something more valuable: the strength to defend justice and the opportunity to turn a place of tragedy into a refuge of hope. "It's all over, my love," she whispered to the wind. "You can rest easy. This house is clean again, just like your heart was." When the sound of church bells rose from the town below, their song reached the cabin softly. Sarah got up from the bench and went into the house, now full of light and life. There were no ghosts of the past left, only memories that no longer hurt as they once did. She had closed the darkest page of her story and had begun another, where pain was transformed into help for others. She learned that evil can win for a while, but it never triumphs forever. In the end, truth and kindness always find a way to break through, even in the thickest mountain fog. If you've made it to the end of this story, I want you to confess it in the comments. Write the word justice to let me know you're here with me until the very last second. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell, because there are even more intense stories coming that you won't want to miss. And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it too. And if you're left wanting more, don't leave just yet. Head over to the other stories on the channel right now. There are many tales of betrayal, revenge, and family secrets waiting for you.